Heart of Darkness, page 35. I went forward and ordered the chain to be hauled in short so as to be ready to trip the anchor and move the steamboat at once if necessary. Will they attack? Whispered an odd voice. We will all be butchered in this fog, murmured another. The faces twitched with the strain, the hands trembled slightly, the eyes forgot to wink. It was very curious to see the contrast of expressions of the white men and of the black fellows of our crew, who are as much strangers to that part of the river as we, though their homes were only 800 miles away. The whites, of course greatly discomposed, had besides a curious look of being painfully shocked by such an outrageous row. The others had an alert, naturally interested expression, but their faces were essentially quiet, even those of the one or two who grinned as they hauled at the chain. Several exchanged short, grunting phrases, which seemed to settle the matter to their satisfaction. Their headman, a young, broad-chested black, severely draped in dark blue-fringed cloths, with fierce nostrils and his hair all done up artfully in oily ringlets, stood near me. "Aha," I said, just for good fellowship's sake. "Catch him," he snapped, with a bloodshot widening of his eyes and a flash of sharp teeth. "Catch him. Give him to us." "To you, eh?" I asked. "What would you do with him?" "Eat him," he said curtly, and leaning his elbow on the rail, looked out into the fog in a dignified and profoundly pensive attitude. I would no doubt have been properly horrified, had it not occurred to me that he and his chaps must be very hungry, that they must have been growing increasingly hungry for at least this month past. They had been engaged for 6 months. I don't think a single one of them had any clear idea of time, as we, at the end of countless ages, have. They still belonged to the beginnings of time, had no inherited experience to teach them, as it were. A little bit racist, don't you think? And of course, as long as there was a piece of paper written over in accordance with some farcical law or other made down the river, it didn't enter anybody's head to trouble how they would live. Certainly they had brought with them some rotten hippo meat, which couldn't have lasted very long anyway, even if the pilgrims hadn't, in the midst of a shocking hullabaloo, thrown a considerable quantity of it overboard. It looked like a high-handed proceeding, but it was really a case of legitimate self-defense. You can't breathe dead hippo, waking, sleeping, and eating, and at the same time keep your precarious grip on existence. Besides that, they had given them every week 3 pieces of brass wire, each about 9 inches long, and the theory was they were to buy their provisions with that currency in riverside villages. You can see how that worked. There are either no villages, or the people were hostile, or the director, who, like the rest of us fed out of tins, with an occasional old he-goat thrown in, didn't want to stop the steamer for some more or less recondite reason. So unless they swallowed the wire itself, or made loops of it to snare the fishes with, I don't see what good their extravagant salary could do them. I must say it was paid with a regularity worthy of a large and honorable trading company. For the rest, the only thing to eat, though it didn't look eatable in the least, I saw in their possession was a few lumps of some stuff like half-cooked dough of a dirty lavender color. They kept wrapped in leaves, and now and then swallowed a piece of, but so small it seemed done more for the looks of the thing than for any serious purpose of sustenance. Why in the name of all the gnawing devils of hunger they didn't go for us? They were 30 to 5, and have a good tuck-in for once, amazes me now when I think of it. He's marveling that they didn't just eat the white people because the white people were so outnumbered. They were big, powerful men, with not much capacity to weigh the consequences, with courage, with strength, even yet, though their skins were no longer glossy and their muscles no longer hard. And I saw that something restraining, one of those human secrets that baffle probability, had come into play there. I looked at them with a swift quickening of interest, not because it occurred to me that I might be eaten by them before long, though I own to you that I just then perceived, in a new light as it were, how unwholesome the pilgrims looked, and I hoped, yes, I positively hoped, that my aspect was not so, what shall I say, so unappetizing. A touch of fantastic vanity which fitted well with the dream sensation that pervaded all my days at that time. Perhaps I had a little fever, too. One can't live with one's finger everlastingly on one's pulse. I had often a little fever, or a little touch of other things, the playful paw-strokes of the wilderness, the preliminary trifling before the more serious onslaught which came in due course. So he's saying that the white people look pretty unsavory and not very tasty to eat, and he hopes that he looks not as untasty as the rest of them. Yes, I looked at them as you would look on any human being, with a curiosity of their impulses, motives, capacities, weaknesses, when brought to the test of an inexorable physical necessity. Restraint? What possible restraint? Was it superstition, disgust, patience, fear, or some kind of primitive honor? No fear can stand up to hunger. No patience can wear it out. Disgust simply does not exist where hunger is, and as to superstition, beliefs, and what you may call principles, they are less than chaff in a breeze. Don't you know the devilry of lingering starvation, its exasperating torment, its black thoughts, its somber and brooding ferocity? Well, I do. It takes a man all his inborn strength to fight hunger properly. It's really easier to face bereavement, dishonor, and the perdition of one's soul than this kind of prolonged hunger. Sad but true. And these chaps, too, had no earthly reason for any kind of scruple. Restraint? I would just as soon have expected restraint from a hyena prowling amongst the corpses of a battlefield. But there was the fact facing me, the fact dazzling, to be seen like the foam on the depths of the sea, like a ripple on an unfathomable enigma, a mystery greater when I thought of it than the curious, inexplicable note of desperate grief in this savage clamor that had swept by us on the river bank, behind the blind whiteness of the fog. Okay, so number 19. What do the cannibals want Marlowe to do? They want him to catch the unseen native and give him to them to eat. What have the cannibals brought to eat? Number 20. They brought that dead hippo and some kind of flour paste. Number 21. How are they paid and why is this a problem? They get paid in strands of wire, but they can't trade it for food. Okay, 2 pilgrims were quarreling in hurried whispers as to which bank. Left. No, how can you? Right, of course. It is very serious, said the manager's voice behind me. I would be desolated if anything should happen to Mr. Kurtz before we came up. I looked at him and had not the slightest doubt he was sincere. He was just the kind of man who would wish to preserve appearances. That was his restraint. But when he muttered something about going on at once, I did not even take the trouble to answer him. I knew and he knew that this was impossible. Were we to let go our hold of the bottom, we would be absolutely in the air, in space. We wouldn't be able to tell where we were going to, whether up or downstream or across, till we fetched against one bank or the other, and then we wouldn't know at first which it was. Of course, I made no move. I had no mind for a mash-up. You couldn't imagine a more deadly place for a shipwreck. Whether drowned at once or not, we were sure to perish speedily in one way or another. I authorize you to take all the risks, he said after a short silence. I refuse to take any, I said shortly, which was just the answer he expected, though its tone might have surprised him. Well, I must defer to your judgment. You are captain, he said with marked civility. I turned my shoulder to him in sign of my appreciation and looked into the fog. How long would it last? It was the most hopeless lookout. The approach to this Kurtz, grubbing for ivory in the wretched bush, was beset by as many dangers as though he had been an enchanted princess sleeping in a fabulous castle. I like that line. Will they attack, do you think? Asked the manager in a confidential tone. I did not think they would attack for several obvious reasons. The thick fog was one. If they left the bank in their canoes, they would get lost in it as we would be if we attempted to move. Still, I had also judged the jungle of both banks quite impenetrable, and yet eyes were in it, eyes that had seen us. The riverside bushes were certainly very thick, but the undergrowth behind was evidently penetrable. However, during the short lift I had seen no canoes anywhere in the reach, certainly not abreast of the steamer. But what made the idea of attack inconceivable to me was the nature of the noise, of the cries we had heard. They had not the fierce character boding immediate hostile intention. Unexpected, wild and violent as they had given me an irresistible impression of sorrow. The glimpse of the steamboat had for some reason filled those savages with unrestrained grief. The danger, if any, I expounded, was from our proximity to a great human passion let loose. Even extreme grief may ultimately vent itself in violence, but more generally takes the form of apathy. Okay, number 22. What is the main reason Marlowe thinks the natives will not attack? He says that the scream that they heard was sad, not angry.